Hi everybody, it's Brian and I'm back with another Fusion 360 solution set. This time we are doing assignment number 7, the diffuser. So here is our lovely diffuser. Mostly this is a loft with a shell and some patterning happening here to deal with creating this hollow diffuser. So let's go ahead and get started. So just a quick look at the drawing here. There's some detailed drawings of what the pattern looks like, but just trying to get an understanding of where to start. I am going to start with the rectangle on the end that forms this sort of foundation, or this part of the diffuser. So that's 115 wide by 60 high. And we're going to start that on the right hand plane. So I'm going to create a sketch, choose my right plane, and watch what I'm going to do here. And there's a reason I do this, and I'll explain it here in a second. I'm going to choose rectangle, I'm going to choose center rectangle, and I'm going to pin the center of my rectangle at the origin point. And I believe this was 115 by 60. So the reason I do that is because the intersection point at the origin gives me both the top plane, the right plane, and the front plane. And so when I create the guide rails between the two lofts, I want those to land actually on the front plane, and then I don't need to create an extra plane for that. You could absolutely do that, but it just makes it a little bit easier to not have to worry about doing that. So I'll show you that in a second. But anyway, so the first step is create that rectangle, center rectangle at the origin point. Then I'm going to go ahead and extrude this thing. Let's check back. The distance of the extrusion is 200. So we will extrude this guy 200, and that finishes off that base geometry. Now, going back to my home view here, the other part of this, the other main sort of geometry, is this cylinder that exists up above. And so that, I'm just going to draw a circle on a plane that is parallel to the plane that I drew that face on. Or in this case, parallel to the right-hand side. So that cylinder has an outer diameter of 80, right? I can see that here and here if I zoom in. Outer diameter of 80, outer diameter of 80, has a length of 150. And if we look at the top view, the center line of that cylinder is centered with the center line of the rectangle. So that's another important factor in how to draw that. So let's go back to my new file. To draw this, I need to start with a new plane. So I'm going to zoom out, move this over. I'm going to orbit around a little bit here. I'm going to go offset plane, and I'm going to choose the face, this face here, which is also the right plane. And that's 200 millimeters away. So I could just drag that out. I can type in 200, it doesn't matter. But that becomes the plane I'm going to sketch on. So now I go to create a sketch. I do it on that new plane I just drew. And I'm going to draw a circle in line with the origin point, but up here a bit, right? So I'm going to draw that circle. I know that circle has a diameter of 80, so I'll put that in. I know that that circle is in line with the origin point, right? It's centered on this rectangle. Which means it's in line with the origin point. So that's another reason I'm using the center rectangle here. I could absolutely draw in a midpoint here and then like project that line to this, and then I could tie those together. But right now, because this is aligned with the origin, and the origin extends actually in infinity in all directions, I can always tie to that. So the next part of fully defining this circle is to choose that point and the origin point and make them horizontal or vertical to one another. So that keeps that in line. The last thing we have to do is we have to give this a height away from that. And so what I need to do is go back to my drawing, and I need to look and see this height, right? And this is giving me from the center line of my rectangle to the center line of my cylinder is 110 units away. So go back here, and I'm going to create a sketch dimension between here and here, and that's going to be 110. That should fully define that circle. I can finish the sketch. Again, clicking back to the drawing. If I look, that sketch is, that cylinder is 150 millimeters long. So go back here, and I can extrude this guy this way, 150. So that's the two main bodies that form my geometry. Now I have a loft that needs to go from this surface to this surface, but I need to define that loft with a guide rail. And I've given you a little clue, if you look at the drawing here, what that guide rail might be. So you see it's this 350, this radius for 350 is the top of that loft. So I'm going to create an arc that has that 350 radius to it to do that guide curve. Now, the thing that that isn't apparent, and I've answered some of these questions via email for some of you, is where do those guide rails come from? And in this case, it's just a single guide rail, and it's in line with these center lines of this, right? So some of you try to create a guide rail from like this corner to the center and this corner to the center, or from this point to the middle of the circle, but that's not the radius. I'm not giving you the radius from here to there, or the radius from here to here. I'm giving you the radius from this point to this point, right? So that should be your clue. The only place, I should say, that this point exists is at the center of the height of that cylinder, right? Or right up at this point. So I need to create a guide curve. The only way to do that is to put it on a plane. And so this is what I was saying earlier about one of my other choices about putting this at the origin point, is it allows me to just start to draw on the front plane. Now, if you didn't start at the origin point, then you need to create a new plane, which in this case would be a mid-plane between this face and the opposite face of that rectangle. But because I have that front plane already in existence, I'm just going to choose that. So we'll create a new sketch. I'll put it on my front plane here. And I need to project that geometry. So again, it's that projection that's coming into play. So I'm going to go to Create and Project Include, Project. I need to make sure that this circle shows up, right? And the projection of that will be this cross section of the circle, this line, right? And I want this, again, that's where that plane intersects the rectangle. So it's going to give me the endpoints of that rectangle. So that may have not been totally obvious, but those points are the things that I need to be able to grab off those geometries. So that's that projection component that you have to do. Once I have those, I have this point now and this point now, which is that's what the projection gives me. Now I can go to Create, Arc, 3-point arc. I click there, I click there, I click somewhere like that, and I'm going to give that a dimension of 350, and that's going to lock in that arc. That's it. That's that sketch. So I finished that sketch, go back to my home view, and you can see how these things are related now. If I go to a front view, you can see that's where I see that guide curve. That's it. That's how easy the guide curve is. Now I'm going to go to my loft, create loft. The profiles I'm going to loft is this face and this face. And then guide rail type, I'm going to select a guide rail and choose this guy. That's it. So I think some of you actually overcomplicated what needed to happen, and that's okay. I'm not going to mess with these guys at all. There's no twist to this, so I'm just going to extend those out the way that they are. That's it. Okay, now my next step is to create a shell of this object. So before I do that, let's look at the drawing quickly. And here it is, 2 millimeters typical is that shell thickness. That's what that's showing you. I did this cross-section view so you could tell that this was in fact hollow here, right? And that you see that cut through there. So now that we know that, I'm going to go back here I'm going to go to my shell command, faces and bodies that I want to remove this face so I can create this hollow. I'm going to be going in, right, because the outer, that 80 millimeter diameter of this cylinder is the exterior of that cylinder. So I'm going to go in, and I'm going to go in a thickness of 2 millimeters. Right, we do that and click OK, and that will hollow out. If we look inside of there, it hollows out the entire inside of that, but it keeps the exterior geometry of the rectangle intact so that we can draw those patterns on that rectangle. Okay, now we need to deal with the patterns. We have patterns this face, this front face, and this face. So these are going to be pretty straightforward, although I'm going to use a little magic trick here, which if you guys didn't explore this, you'll probably be annoyed that I didn't show you, but I'm showing you now. So here's the advantage of looking at the assignment. So let's go in here, look. Let's look at the detail of this. And the first thing I want to do is I want to figure out how big my initial slot is. And so the slot is from center point to center point of the circle is 20 millimeters. It has a radius of 4. That's the first slot is 20 millimeters away from this bottom left corner and 12 millimeters up from that bottom corner. So this is where I want to draw that first pattern, right? Then we can know that this is going to be a spaced pattern because I'm giving the space here 35 millimeters and the space here 18 millimeters. And then we just need to count how many we have. So let's start first with this slot. So 20 and R4, we'll do that. And so I'm going to go ahead, create a sketch on this face, because again, I'm giving you the dimensions from this point down here in the corner. And I'm going to go ahead and do the slot. And this is what I was saying, this is the trick that if you drew it with circles and straight lines, that's great. I am going to use this lovely slot tool. I'm going to use the center to center slot. Click, click, third click, and then I just need to dimension it. Wasn't that simple? Are you annoyed that I didn't show you that? And you had to draw that by hand. And then I'm going to click here to here, and that's going to be 20. Okay, so that defines the size of my slot. Then I need to put this where it goes. And again, if we look, 20 from the end and 12 up. So I can add those dimensions here. From here to here is 20. And from here to here is 12. Fully defined. And again, that slot tool is really, really helpful. You can even see there's a curved slot too, which is totally cool. So you can do these fancy slots that way. Okay, so that's it. We're going to finish the sketch. I'm going to go ahead and take this. Now again, could you pattern this and then extrude it? Yes. I'm going to extrude this once and then pattern the extrusion. So we're going to click extrude. I'm going to select this. I'm going to go inward to create a cut. I'm going to do to all. There we go. And click OK. And if we look, that's going to go through both sides. So that gets me the pattern on both sides of this guy. And now I'm going to create the actual pattern based on this. So let's go back to the drawing really quick. We know that they're 35 apart. They're from on the X direction. They're 18 apart on the Y direction. And if we come back up and look at the drawing, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 by 3. So it's a 5 by 3 pattern, and 35 and 18. So let's go here. We will go to create a rectangular pattern. Objects. First of all, pattern type. I'm going to switch to features. The features I want to pattern is this extrude here. So I'm selecting it from my timeline. You could go in and select it here, but I want to make sure I get both of them. So I think it's actually cleaner to select it from your timeline. Directions. I want this direction and that direction. So I want a 2-direction thing. I'm not going to do an extent. I'm going to do spacing. In my first direction, which is this highlighted one along this axis, we know there's 5, quantity of 5, and that they're 35 units apart, or 35 millimeters apart. So that gives me those guys. And then in the other direction, I know there's 3, and they are 18 apart. Right, and that gives me those 3. The directions look good. It's giving me those phantom images. That looks fine. I can go ahead and click OK, and that gets me that pattern. So that pattern is relatively simple once you have all of that. Now we're going to deal with the pattern on this other edge. And the process here is very, very similar to what we just did, except we're going to get rid of a few here in the middle. So let's go back and look at this. We'll look at the detail of this first. So 10 millimeter diameter circle. 10 millimeters from that bottom left corner, 11 millimeters up. So we deal with that, and then it's 19 and 19 spacing. So there we have it, 19 by 19, diameter of 10, 10 from the corner, 11 up. So I'm saying that out loud, so hopefully I remember when I go to draw it over here. So same deal, create a sketch, this time on this face. Zoom up here to this bottom corner, circle. This was 10. And then this circle from here to here was 10. And from here to here was 11. So that gets me that foundation circle. So finish the sketch. Again, I'm going to rotate it around here. Yep, that looks good. All right, we're going to extrude this circle through the material. I'm going to go, instead of distance, I'm going to go to object. I don't want to go through all because I don't want it to perforate this front face. I only want it to perforate through this back face. I don't want to give it a distance though, because I want to, if I change the thickness of my material, I realize later I want it to be 4 millimeters wide instead of 2 millimeters wide. I don't want to have to go back in and modify these things. That's why it's important to use the extent feature. I just have to select the back face of this so it knows to go through that back face. That's it. That's my cut through, and you can see that opens up that hole. Okay, and let's scooch this over. Now we can bring it back over and we can pattern this guy out. So going back here, what's my pattern? 19 by 19. And how many of these things do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 by 3. So 6 wide, 3 tall, and we're going to lose the ones in the middle. So rectangular pattern, features, this because I used it last time, it's pre-selected. Objects, again, I'm going to select it from my timeline. Directions, I'm going to choose select there and choose this bottom edge and this left edge. Along the bottom, we knew we had 6 and that they're 19 apart. And going up, we know we had 3 and they were also 19 apart. But we want to make sure suppress is selected, and I'm going to go in here and suppress these ones in the middle. Click OK, and lo and behold, give Fusion a second to do its math, and we have that pattern. Okay. The last part of this assignment is to stick your name on this front edge. I had written diffuser there. This is just another sketch, so I'm going to go create sketch, again on this face. We've done this before, so this should not be new information. I'm going to do text. Put my last name there. I don't know. Let's do 15 millimeters high. Good. Yeah, let's do Arial black. It's a little thicker. We'll bold it out there. And let's just move it over. I'm not going to spend a lot of time lining that up. Finish the sketch. There we go. Now we can extrude that guy into the surface. We're going to change it from distance to object. And we'll rotate around and again select that back face. And it will cut out that my name. Some of you realize that like the middle parts will get lost. So, you know, that's fine. You could go in and adjust your sketch if you wanted to deal with that. But there we go. I put my name on the back of that diffuser. So that's the assignment. That finishes it out. That's everything you need to create that diffuser. If we look in there, you can see it's in fact hollow. I can see the holes on the other side just barely. And we create our diffuser. So hopefully that was helpful, and you now understand how to approach drawing this. That's the most important thing, is that you actually, if you didn't quite get it right, you now know how and why to approach it. All right, thanks for tuning in, and have a couple more videos for you coming up, but we're getting close to the end of the tutorials, at least for the Art 4 Foundations class. Thanks all for tuning in. Bye.